Good afternoon and welcome to Flat Earth UK Live. Joining me tonight is Nick from YouTube channel Phuket Word. How you doing, Nick?
I'm good, thank you. Hello, Nathan, and hello, Flat Earth researchers, debaters, and debunkers.
Superb to have you here, mate. On tonight's show, we will be discussing the sun on the Flat Earth horizon, possible grids in the sky, and I will mute Nick on the live feed. So maybe you can kick us off, Nick. We've had a bit of a disastrous start there. Can you start us off by telling us, how did you find out the Earth is flat?
Well, I suppose I'm one of those guys that I never felt that comfortable with it when I was told when I was a kid. I can remember that, but as I grew up, got into space and things like that, it was always very fascinating, repeating factoids and things like that. And been since the internet arrived in Thailand, probably 15 years ago or something, then of course I embarked on a lot of alternative research, various conspiracies, and it got to the point where I was feeling, well, what's next? And then I suppose almost a year ago now, up it popped on YouTube. It was Math Powerland. So he deflowered my flat Earth virginity there, and then I listened to Eric Dubay, and I was sold with his very cool, collected, and confident manner. And I later on listened to Mark Sargent as well. But by then I was already, an instinctive flat earther overnight, and then set about trying to prove it to myself, really. That was after hearing about it. I just wanted to see if, I wasn't out to debunk it. I just wanted to see if what they were saying had any truth. And looking at the horizons, taking video, things like that, very quickly became apparent that we assume an awful lot. And just brushing up on the history as well, the history of the globe and the science behind it, it very quickly became apparent that these facts and knowledge that we're told about are all based on assumptions, and the very first one being the assumption by Eratosthenes that everything was in a circle. And you can see that whether it's astronomical measurements, the passage of Venus, the distance to the sun, the size of the sun, all these things, the moon, have all been based on this one single assumption. So it was easy for me to see how the whole globe idea had taken hold and been assumed without too much effort or too much debate, really, unless obviously we weren't there for the debates that might have taken place maybe 100 years beforehand or 1,000 years ago. But there you go. That's how I got into flat Earth.
When you say the word debate, because it seems like it's a restriction. We're not allowed to debate it. You've got people like Neil deGrasse Tyson saying we shouldn't give as much airtime. We shouldn't even be looking at this. And why can't it be a debate? Why can't we have it like that?
Absolutely, yeah. And that's the first thing that you see. That and another thing that really intrigued me was the human nature side of it. I mean, obviously, being in Thailand for at least half my life now, I've had to adapt to this completely different culture, and it took a long time. And it's only maybe a decade or more where you have experiences and you learn things about the culture, which makes you examine your own thoughts and your own actions, and you're based on your own upbringing and culture. So it was, again, maybe that also helped in that it was easy for me to just kind of disassociate from the globe and compare the two, because that's what I've been doing for the past 20 years. Is every time I have a new situation or learn a new word, I have to think about what that means in English, and of course they have different connotations. You might have a direct translation of a word, but the feeling or the emotion behind a word in Thai is completely different to, or there are just words that you don't have in English, and you can only understand if you understand the culture. So going through that process of examining my own culture and my own beliefs was, I think, very helpful in building up to accepting flat Earth. Not just jumping in and saying, yeah, oh, it's got to be flat. You know, not just accepting it as a belief, but thinking, okay, this is worth looking at. And
you've done some really sort of close scrutiny of flat Earth. I mean, the next question I was going to ask was, in a very direct way, why does the sun sink below the horizon?
Okay, it is a tough one, isn't it? It is tough. And of course, I don't know for sure, but from what I've seen, and I think any flat earther that's listening knows that feeling when you examine everything with fresh eyes all over again. And whether it's you're looking at something on the tabletop, you're putting your head up and down and seeing how things move about and parallax and all these kind of things. You're just, 24/7. I mean, every waking moment, whether it's a cloud, it's just constant.
Right.
You just do not stop thinking about it. I'm sorry, I've forgotten the question though. Where I was going.
What I'm trying to get to is, in your most recent video, you've got a section in it which shows the sun in detail getting smaller, and from my experience, it's quite difficult to actually find a video that breaks that down in such great detail, but explains the reason why you end up with a sort of half circle going below the horizon line, which a lot of the debunkers will use as, look, we must be on a globe because there's the sun sinking below the horizon line. And you basically obliterate that with your most recent video, and I just want you to talk through it, basically.
Okay, great. I'm glad I'm really hoping it makes sense, because it does to me. Because the first thing I did was, I thought, well, I can't get up high. What I can do is I can find a nice, fairly flat road and film it. And what I noticed was even the slightest rise or dip, you get people say, you've got to find a flat surface. Well, no, because nothing on this earth is completely flat. Nothing natural, whether it's the waves or the ground, nothing is flat. So getting down low, really down onto the ground, you could still see the horizon comes up to the eye level, but it's maybe the ground that's just a meter or so in front of you until there's a slight dip or a raise, and that creates your horizon. So, and of course, because the further things are away from you, the smaller they appear. A small bump or a rise or a dip even in front of you can make a huge difference to, I filmed runners and cars. So what I noticed with these horizons is that, okay, you have your eyes bringing the ground up and the sky down, but there's also this line on the top where everything gets distorted. And I find this fascinating because and literally seeing cars and people getting cut off, even though that road or those roads that I used were as flat as I could find and as long as I could find. But, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm not sure you highlighted that in the video, because I must admit, I don't think I got that from the video. Was that road completely flat then? Yes. Well, flat and straight. I mean, that's the thing.
I say because it didn't look it on the video in the same way as when you look out to the ocean, it looks like it's rising up. The road had the same effect.
Basically, yes. That's what fascinated me, because I was thinking, oh, it's like, wow, you can see exactly the same effect on the road as you would see at sea. Excuse me. And of course, with such a dramatic, the lower you go, the sharper the angle is going to be. Or the closer your horizon is going to be. So it's quite dramatic. And I was fascinated by that. And of course, people would say, that's not a straight road. It's got a massive dip in it. And like I said, it's never absolutely completely level or flat. But literally a couple of centimeters will cut off the legs of someone 100 meters away, or the tires of a car. So this made sense straight away. that this is what's happening at the horizon. If this is happening 200 meters down the road, it's not because of a curve. And that, I remember, you know, that was the first thing. People are so used to seeing this image of the globe and us looking at the globe, and the person is always stuck on the side of the globe. Well, the thing is, if you're on a circle, you're always on the top. But right from the start, with the globe and someone on the globe looking ahead is always pictured at an angle. And of course, their eyes are directed at this bulge. So this is something that a lot of people just can't even get past. They just think you're seeing the bulge, but there is no bulge because you're always on the top.
Quite right. I mean, there's a lot of people who are currently analysing the way you measure curve and calling it a wall, and it's hard to kind of explain verbally that, like you say, you're not looking down at an angle at the ball, you're always looking out. So you're going to see that massive drop off at 8 inches per mile squared based on the way the heliocentric model places you, always at the top.
Yeah. And of course, you know, it's easy to see that the math has just been reverse engineered. So I'm pretty sure that this picture we often see of Newton with the prism is a kind of, again, it's a poke by the psychopaths. You know, it's he sussed it out. He sussed out how far we can see and the effects going on. So let's just reverse the math. And okay, you can see that far, and that's as far as the globe is. But that's, you know, if you really look, if anyone can look at a horizon and you can see it does not look quite right. And the reason it doesn't look quite right is because the foreground is all in focus. You are not seeing as far as any supposed curve. Yeah. So it's the highest wave in front of you that's closest to you, that's, you know, cutting things off if it's on the sea. And so again, I didn't finish explaining. So every single sunset is unique and different. Okay, sometimes you see this convergence line on top of the horizon line, and you see the sun kind of squish into this line as it goes away. Other times you hardly see that. But I suppose that also depends on how far you are actually physically seeing. Yeah, that's what became very, very apparent straight away is that this convergence line on top is where light is getting distorted, and of course it's almost like a black hole. There's a point, and because your vision is everything you can see. I remember my very first kind of tabletop experiment with I put a toy car on the table, put the camera at the end of the table. You know, you can't really, you can see all of the table, but it's all very much condensed. So the moment you start rising up, you see it, everything kind of expands. And it's like, wow, there wasn't a limit. It wasn't that I was only seeing so far on the table. I was seeing to the end of the table, but all of that entire table was squished into a very short space in my vision. And as soon as you rise up, then that expands. So that's another kind of thing that happens. You can see it. You just see how you see once. I think a lot of people just forget that it's our eyes. Everything we see is because of the way our eyes interpret it. And the moment you start thinking about that as yourself being you look at yourself in the third person as being the observer, then people forget that they're using their eyes to see this. And then so if you can kind of externalize that, and things start to make sense a little bit more.
I mean, just to bring a bit of clarity in your video, well, taking it back a step, in the heliocentric model with the sun being 93 million miles away or whatever it is, you've got an impossibility that it would ever change size as we rotate on Earth. Whereas in your video, you measure out in pixels specifically how big the sun is as it recedes towards the horizon line. I mean, was it actually just the pixels on screen that you measured?
Yes, it was. I mean, my initial intention wasn't necessarily to do that, and I thought, okay, let's give it a go. Now I've got some nice clear. We've been waiting for the rainy season to clear up, and finally we're getting some lovely sunsets. So it's great to go out there and actually finally film some proper sunsets. So I've just been trying to get different, whether it's a long shot or close-ups, and just do the time exposure. So I thought, hey, let's just measure it. Let's just see. because it is a bone of contention. It's the first thing a lot of people will say. Well, if the sun's doing what you say it's doing, then it should get smaller.
It does.
But yeah, and it does. So I don't think that's a really. It's an okay way to measure it. I mean, the camera didn't move. I didn't change the zoom.
There are now several videos that show this in in a much more obvious way. It's just nice that when you're addressing a slightly different topic, you still address the fact that the sun does recede. It does get smaller as it goes away from you, because it is literally traveling away from you. We're not spinning around as it stays at a fixed point.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, the other thing you've been doing for a really long time is examining the sunspots. I remember one of your first comments on one of my videos was about them. And without taking the wind out of your sails, do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Okay. Well, again, actually, that was the one. Well, I bought some glass, welders lens, and my original intention then was to measure the sun, but it was just too difficult to do, because I was trying to do it. It was just awkward. But going to the beach has been a lot easier to do it. Anyway. It just came up. There's a sunspot, and I thought, oh, okay, great. I've obviously seen sunspots before when I was a kid. Sometimes I'd seen them in the UK just with the naked eye. I
didn't know that. You can actually see sunspots. I know you shouldn't be staring at the sun at all, but can you explain that? That's new to me.
Well, I remember my dad pointing it out when I was a kid. Oh, look, and it was obviously. I think the sun is obviously not so intense in the UK, and I do remember them being pointed out to me, and you could see them with the naked eye at that point. But I hadn't really examined them until recently. But so basically, when I saw these. I think it was a pair of sunspots, at least, and this was first thing in the morning, because I'd gotten into the habit of, getting outside and filming, just observing a lot more of what's going on. And so from, I think it was 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, there was a sunspot, and I just kept going back every hour, because I was also just tracking the sun. Let's see where it goes, but every hour. Those sunspots remained in exactly the same place, and that was interesting. It was a note to take, and I look out to the east as the sun comes towards me, and it really does, to me, it really does look like that, because I'm near the equator. It literally appears to come towards me, just like an aircraft would come towards me. I know it's not quite the same in the UK. It kind of arcs from the kind of southeast, doesn't it? You see it arc across the sky.
For somebody who has absolutely no idea what that means, what does it actually demonstrate that the sunspots didn't move? Okay,
I did obviously looking at what sunspots are supposed to do, and the sun is supposed to rotate, and we are told it rotates at a rate of about 1 revolution per month. And the sunspots are said to move across the sun. So that was and that was strange in my eyes. That the understanding was that somehow these sunspots should be moving across the sun throughout the day. So I filmed from 8 in the morning until 3 or 4 in the evening, and basically the sunspots had remained in precisely the same place. And this is. I think there was a pair of sunspots on the edge, and there was one on the other side. When I looked after the sun had gone overhead, everything flips. So the sunspots that were at the top of the sun when I was in the morning, as soon as I turned around to look and follow it go off to the west, then those sunspots were on the bottom. So of course, this just immediately felt like it was something going overhead, rather than because of the Earth spinning. So, but then I had to look at that some more, and this was an argument presented to me by globe heads that, well, of course, that's what would happen to the sunspots because you turned around and you changed your perspective. Okay, fine. I knew I didn't have really solid proof. But going back to the UK recently was an excellent chance to look at the sun and see what happened to sunspots in the UK. So I filmed them about 3 or 4 times here, always the same. The sunspots will remain in exactly the same place on the sun throughout the day, apart from the perspective changing and them appearing to flip to the other side just because I've had to turn around and look from a different angle. But in the UK, what I noticed was the sunspots were rotating, going clockwise. So this was like, wow, it's what I imagined would actually happen based on just how, just seeing the flat earth kind of clearly. So I was really, really chuffed that it actually came out that way. It was an instinctive thing that it would come out like that. But before I announced those results, I asked several, people that were attacking me for my sunspots and I said, okay, please tell me if you can you predict if they would be the same or different if I viewed these sunspots from the UK? Nobody, not one of these people that were attacking me about the sunspots not one of them. And I tried it with several people, and I waited about 3 or 4 weeks asking people over and over again to please predict, if you're so sure of the heliocentric model, please predict what's going to happen to the sunspots compared to the ones I've seen in Phuket. How different, will they be different or will they be the same in the UK? And nobody could answer it in that way. So, and recently a guy called Bo, he did, I can't remember the YouTube name he goes by, but he did one where he put the iPhone on the floor and watched someone walking away. Really good thing on illustration of how the sun disappears, horizons, etc. But he's been doing the same. He's been filming the sun from California and seeing exactly the same thing. And of course, the main thing here is that the moon does exactly the same thing. I watch, and again, the sun comes along and then the moon comes along, follows pretty much the same path. And every month the moon gets closer and closer, and you get the new moon, and it just absolutely perfectly fits with the flat Earth model. But again, what happens with the moon is the moon comes straight at me, and the only way I can describe it is you've got the bunny rabbit with the rabbit ears. Yeah, they're always it always looks the same. The rabbit is always sitting up straight with its ears up in the air as the moon comes towards me. As soon as it's gone over my head and I'm facing west to watch the moon, the whole thing has flipped upside down. So basically what I was able to observe is that the sun and the moon appear to behave in exactly the same way right here in Phuket. And of course, again, what I was testing in the UK was, does the moon rotate as it goes across the sky? And it does. So the sun and the moon, they remain fixed for me here and flip after they've gone overhead. In the UK, they rotate. Both of them rotate in a clockwise direction. So for me, that's it. This is a smoking gun. The sun and the moon are very similar. They're at similar heights, following a similar path. You cannot put it does not fit. You cannot put your heliocentric model. It just doesn't. It's observation that is always the same, and it's been repeated across the world. And I've even got someone who's south of the equator now is going to start doing it. Someone in Bali, actually. Hopefully I'm not sure exactly where they are. So that will at least be another confirmation, I'm sure. Absolutely, I encourage everyone, go out and measure the sun, film it, do the moon, because they will find the same results. I'm so confident. There's no trickery.
The nicest thing about flat Earth is that you put it down to realization. There's lots of things that people will question throughout their daily life that doesn't make sense and dismiss it almost without giving it any second thought. And when you come to flat Earth, things like you're actually testing, it's almost like you're reaffirming your own observations that you've had your entire life. So things make sense because they make sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that is the mad feeling, isn't it, with the flat Earth? It's like, unlike any other conspiracy, you can go and check it yourself. You can do all the maths you want on paper, but that doesn't reflect reality. Go and look. And
well, I might actually add at this point for anybody who's considering looking at the sun. I mean, for me, doing time lapses and stuff, I can actually in the morning and late evening or late afternoon, you can look at the sun with your naked eye for a short period of time. But I wouldn't recommend to anybody who watches this that they just start staring at the sun. I know you're doing your sunspot footage with is it a welding mask filter?
Yes. But NASA recommends sun gazing. Funnily enough, I read up on it. I do. I've actually something I've done for a while anyway, just especially the morning sun. But obviously, okay, if you don't want to, go and get doctors' advice.
Confirm for anybody who's watching this. I mean, most people have got a time-lapse camera on their phone, and it's a really easy thing to do to just monitor what the sun and the moon's behaviour is. And they're almost identical in their paths. I know that there is a slight difference in the speeds that they travel, but it's absolutely tiny. And in terms of the way they look, the size of them, they're basically the same. So to assume that one is, 236,000 miles away, and the other one's 96, million miles away, it's ridiculous to think that these two objects could be in any way the same in the way that they behave, and they're almost identical.
Yeah, for sure, and that makes sense as well on a biological level, on everything that we see. I mean, this, everything has to have a positive and a negative. So I think the moon and the sun somehow do that. So again, measuring. I remember Eric Dubé pointing out in one of his interviews that moonlight is cold, and I'm like, wow, okay, let's test that one. And the results are kind of it's. They're not, you don't get massive differences, but you do get a difference every time. You get consistent results in that on a windless, a moonlit night, you will get colder in the moonlight. And obviously lots of other people have been testing it and getting, I think you probably get more extreme results in possibly in a colder climate. I don't know, it's difficult to say. But I was getting results of between 1 and 2 degrees difference from moonlight and moon shade, which isn't much, but it was consistent. And I did that several times. And I did a control as well on a new moon where there was no moonlight, very erratic. You couldn't pin it down. So on the times, again, that was just another, okay, that was great, because a lot of the time you hear people say things, or flat earthers say things, and they've already thought about it. They've gone through the whole thought process. They've tested it, and they'll just say it. The moonlight's cold, and that's it. And then they're on to the next thing, and you're like, what? How? And of course, it can be said so nonchalantly that people just think you're just saying it for the hell of it. But no, it's true. It's true.
Yeah, it's the same with the moon going literally the wrong way in the heliocentric model.
I know. To be honest, I never could get my head around it. I hadn't thought about it or looked into it beforehand. But it never really made sense. The moon goes this way and it's only going around. No. And I think one of the things they say about the heliocentric model is that on a new moon is when you would actually see the backside of the moon. And that's the only, that's ridiculous. It's just completely unsubstantiated.
Yeah, none of it makes any sense. This is why, I can't remember who described it as I think it was Wakey Wake. He said it was like a paper mache, and you've only got to poke a little bit and you see straight through it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the other thing, isn't it? When you there's not only are the kind of flat earth proofs actually real, the more you look at it, say the heliocentric model is really just hanging by a thread, the ball hanging by a thread. Yeah,
we've touched on some of the realities of the flat model and some of the total nonsense that's in the heliocentric model, but you're catching some of the most exciting anomalies. Can you tell us about what you captured on one of your recent photographs?
The sky grid, yes. I was absolutely blown away. I cannot put across how freaked out I was to see that. I was taking some time exposure shots with another camera, and I was just messing about with my video camera. I often try and look at stars, and I really don't get that clear a shot. So I wasn't really that bothered, but I was just messing around while my still camera was taking its time exposure shots. And it was a new moon, so there was no moonlight, and I'd chosen a place kind of just down the road from me where there was no light pollution, nothing obstructing me in the sky, no telegraph wires or anything like that. And it was completely by accident. And I didn't see it until afterwards, until looking back through the footage. And I've looked at it again and again, and I've had the camera for several years, and I use it every day, constantly, for work and obviously Earth research and just family stuff. And I've never ever had that happen. And the one thing I'd done that particular night for the first time was to slow down the shutter speed. Although it's a video camera, you can slow down the shutter speed, and I slowed it right down to its minimum level. So I just assume that I was letting in more light than normal, because usually it records at quite a high rate, just to get the clarity. But this time I just set it low, and wow.
Describe, for people who haven't actually seen it, describe exactly in your own words what you captured.
It seems to be, now I must say that I do not know what it is. I have no definite theories of what it is. But what it looked like was, a grid with a kind of curve, almost like a dome shape, and made up of lines which were kind of translucent, but they kind of had the only way I can describe it, but I honestly don't know if I'm describing it correctly, is they had some kind of electromagnetic, energetic feel to it, like something you'd see in the movie, where it's like holographic in nature. And it was definitely there, and it seemed to be, it just looked like some kind of shell, but I can't say how. I mean, I was already zoomed quite far in to the sky at that point.
But it still had a certain degree of perspective to it. To my eyes, it looked like it was actually behind the stars. I don't know if you'd agree.
Yeah, it seemed, at least I would say, kind of separate. Difficult to say whether in front or behind, but definitely, yeah, you could see these kind of, all of a sudden, the sky seemed to have layers. That's a very good way of putting it, Nathan. It kind of, it's like, wow. I'm not really I'm not an advocate of the dome necessarily.
No, it was for the show. Neither of us are really big on the dome, if you like.
But to be honest, I mean, that's what it looks and feels like. But then how far, and does that extend? Is it just an area, it might be worth adding that, I've talked about it in one of my videos before, but of course I often attend Buddhist ceremonies, and especially when you have like an opening, like what do you call it? Someone has a new house, or they have a new business or something. The monks come round, you feed the monks, and they do this chanting in Sanskrit, and it's very, very powerful stuff. You do feel there's a certain vibration being created, and the whole idea of having these ceremonies is to defend the place and the people within it against bad spirits or bad energy. And you really do get this sense that this kind of protective layer is being put in a vibrational kind of, it's being locked down vibrationally. And Phuket itself has a lot of deep history. Right where I am now, a lot of people have died, and it's been a big battle zone when the Burmese invaded here. Phuket had a very deep history in that respect. And I'm just saying that because who knows if that's maybe some kind of vibrational thing there, this grid in the sky. I really don't know.
I mean, it would certainly tie into lots of, parts of the electromagnetic theory. So it's a great photo. Obviously, it's like anything with the lunar wave. As soon as you get a few more people publishing it, it lends more credence to it. But you did touch on DMT releases. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, basically, the people that have been able to see this, a similar thing. I had some comments from people that have actually seen it with their naked eye when they've been on LSD or usually more natural psychedelics. That seemed to be something that people often see, or they might have just been able to see it since they were a kid, or if they saw it once when they had an experience, or took a trip, they are then able to see it again. So it was interesting and curious that a lot of people do have seen this. But it's
did you actually have anybody give a specific account of them seeing it as a child?
One that I read on one of the forums, or that I'd looked at, not directly to me, but it was a conversation in one of these forums. Yeah,
I mean, the only reason I bring it up is because it's to me quite interesting, because I know with hearing, I know we're talking in context of vibrations, but in terms of hearing, as you get older, your sort of the frequency response of your hearing drops as you get older. The fine hairs inside your ear that vibrate will literally drop out, the finer ones, and they get worse and worse. You lose more and more of them as you get older, and you can hear less and less of the higher frequencies. I'm sure there's kid alarms that they now use on some of the London shops. They'll literally have these child alarms that play a pitch that anybody under 16 can hear, and the little sods hear it, and it's really irritating, so they all disappear. But yeah, in other words, it would tie in nicely, if it is a vibrational phenomenon, that children may be more perceptive to it. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely, because they're not clouded by any. Definitely. I was one of those kids that would hear high pitched sounds sometimes. That other people couldn't hear. I'm musical. I make music, so that might have something to do with it. But definitely.
There's loads of interesting things that go on with sound. I mean, you probably realise I'm quite into hi-fi, but even if you ignore your actual audible range that you can pick up on, as hi-fi equipment scales up in quality, often they will go into frequency ranges that it's impossible for any human to hear. But the realism of the sound is often miles more superior to one that doesn't do that, because your body will physically pick up on these vibrations and it lends to the realism, even though you can't actually hear them. So there's quite a lot tied into sensing vibrations over actually hearing them, and many people don't actually understand that principle, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does, totally, because sometimes I'm commissioned to make spa music, and I will put note tones of certain frequencies into the music. You can't hear it, but it makes you feel good. Yeah.
I mean, an easy example is probably to go the other way. Instead of talking about higher frequencies, is to talk about lower frequencies, because most people understand subsonic frequencies, which are well below your hearing range and will make your trousers shake. And that's a much easier way of sort of explaining that principle. You don't hear it, but you definitely sense it.
Yeah, that's right. There's a fascinating story of this. I can't remember her name. She's a percussionist, but she's deaf percussionist. She even teaches. She just picks it all up. And
yeah, I've seen that a few times. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
moving on a little bit, Nick, if that's okay with you, to a slightly different grid. We touched on this again before the show started about psychopaths and maybe the psychopathic control grid. Could you give us your thoughts and feelings on psychopaths?
Well, they're definitely. I've had to deal with them in the past, and they are very disruptive people. Maybe they don't have rhyme or reason. They just get a buzz off causing chaos. And I've observed the duper's delight, and it could be in all manner of situations, and they have no guilt. They're very astute. They understand that they don't necessarily suffer from the same emotions that average people do, but they understand how those emotions work and how to manipulate people with those emotions. But to what ends? With long-term goals? No. And I think that's part of if you want to talk about the psychopathic control grid, it's kind of, it doesn't. I mean, obviously there are people that make very long-term plans, over generations, and that's a very curious thing to see how things can unfold over decades that were obviously pretty much seemed planned a long time ago. But at the same time, you do have this psychopathic element to, especially people that enjoy power, like politicians. I mean, has any politician that we know of ever said, right, I'm going to do the best thing for the people, and that is give the power back to the people? They'll, if I was a politician, that's what I'd do. Just every single thing should go to the vote. Every single decision, basically, it's not up to me, it's up to you. But you never hear a politician speaking like that, because it's all about me, me, me. And so they continue to perpetuate an already disastrous situation for humanity, but they don't care. There's no there's no
empathy. That's basically what defines a psychopath: the complete lack of empathy, the inability to see it from your point of view.
Yeah. Well, maybe they'll understand the emotions, but they don't have that. I remember watching a very good documentary once about a guy who knew he was a psychopath, and he was very clear. He wanted to do all these tests and things like that because he knew that he didn't have the emotions that he should have. And
was that Sam Vaknin by any chance?
Honestly, can't remember his name, but he went on a very extensive kind of search for the answer. I didn't really find it. So is it something, do you think it's something that people are born with? Is it the way the brain's wired?
So. I think, you're a natural born psychopath. You're born without empathy, born using that reptilian primeval part of your brain, and that's just the way it is. I think it's from the way the media portrays this, it seems that they would like to at least highlight the fact that it's obvious from childhood whether or not people are psychopaths. It's hard because the media will always portray psychopaths as the psycho in a Hitchcock movie. They're never going to portray them as what they really are, which is just people who don't give a shit. They're never going to actually portray that. They'll always be the knife-wielding maniac psychopath. So when they portray the child psychopath, they'll always talk about the kid that's drowning kittens and things like that. And that is true, but it's not really the main point of what makes up a psychopath. Most of them won't actually be like that because they don't want to get their hands dirty. It's too much hassle. Whatever's easiest and gets them their game quickest is probably more like what would be the route they take. So the simplest one, blood and guts and the way that the media portrays a psychopath it's just not efficient. It's too much hassle for them. Most of them aren't like that, but that's part of the psychopathic control grid's way of controlling information about who's running the show. If you can portray every psychopath as being a murderer, people pigeonhole them into that category rather than just seeing them as Tony Blair, which is the real psychopaths out there. They don't. They have. I mean, in Malaysia, they tried Tony Blair as a war criminal. If he sets foot in that country, then they'll nab him. But he doesn't. He does not care. And they that makes them very easy to lie. But that's why I don't put too much emphasis on the whole kind of psyop thing, because I don't think there is any need to be afraid of that. I mean, who really
who really is perpetuating the whole globe idea, apart from obviously the space agencies who make a fortune
we
out.
are, as the people. I mean, you see YouTube videos come out daily that will just talk about the moon landings in a positive light, and they'll get their 100,000 viewings within a year or whatever they get. It's perpetuated by us. We're indoctrinated with it. Even in our language, I know you touched on this earlier, just by the nature of the words we use, many of them which have double meanings, we will perpetuate the globe lie just by talking.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, that's interesting, because in Thai and Sanskrit, the world is referred to. There's nouns will have classifiers, and the Earth is referred to as a flat plane in Thai. It's just they know it is. They know, and that's So with my wife and my kids, and just in general, it's not. That's the amazing thing I was also able to see with the whole flat Earth. The only people who are really bothered by it are the people that have been sold the whole space thing, and told that science. I remember I saw someone wearing a NASA jacket, and it was obviously one of these souvenir jackets, and the words on it were "Science is America's answer." So this is. It's
a Western thing. Heliocentric model is a Western belief.
Absolutely, and of course this was the kind of moment of realization as well. What is it that makes people so angry? And then of course they're acting like you're a kind of extremist religious person. Oh, hang on a minute. Oh, I see. Okay, the whole globe thing, it's a religion. The globe is a religious symbol. And then that was a moment of clarity as well. It's just, wow, there you go.
That's part of that programming, is to ridicule flat Earth, to ridicule the truth. That's part of the programming.
Yeah. But I think, what I was saying in one of my recent videos is that I think when you mention flat Earth, although there is the ridicule, there's probably this instinctive realization that, oh my God, you might be right. And they just, boom, they go into defense mode straight away. So,
anger, they get so vicious and angry about it. I mean, there's very few things that annoy me, maybe Mandela effect, but not a lot annoys me. But if you mention flat Earth to a globehead or your average Joe, the anger that you get from them is unbelievable.
Right. But then again, these are often people that are they love collecting these little factoids and repeating them to other people. They kind of it becomes their life. They'll sit down and watch Tim Peake from start to finish, and they won't be looking for things. And you can, just a simple thing. How come I can stand on my balcony with the street light glaring at me, the lights on, and you can still see the stars? If I can see the stars with all these lights blaring into the camera lens, then these guys on the space station should be able to pick up a star or two. And you point that out, and it's just, come on, you have some discretion. And you'd say, the cameras can't, it's overexposed, and no. It becomes
I remember once looking at the moon and a plane through the field of view, and don't get me wrong, it was there for a fraction of a second, but it was in focus. And you think, that doesn't make any sense. How could that possibly stay in focus?
Yeah. And that and it doesn't take much to go, yes, you can see the moon very, very clearly. And these days, people just with, off-the-shelf cameras taking some amazing pictures of the moon. And of course, you can understand this idea that, the moon kind of seems like a sphere. I mean, we really don't know what shape it is, but you can see mountains on it. You can see craters that seem to have shadows. So the whole thing about whether it's actually making its own light or not is very, very difficult to tell. But it's total mystery, but it's clearly very close.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm going to do a slightly dodgy segue now. I noticed you'd subscribed to, let's get his name right, Mr. Flat Taxi Rainbow Chemtrails. And on one of the comments you left, you mentioned synchronicity. Can you talk us through synchronicity? Okay.
Obviously, there seems to be, it's weird. Obviously, so some people have kind of jumped on the flat Earth bandwagon, as it were, kind of maybe swapping one belief for another because it's cool or it's trendy or they like the guy that's kind of telling it to them. But I sense that within that there is a core of people who really get it, and they're flat earthers because something has happened. Something has, you know, apart from the physical geographic thing, you've got this whole examination of your belief system. And when you talk to a flat earther who really is a genuine flat earther, there's no need, you really don't have to say much. You know, you don't even, because you're on the same level. And you do see things come up. Okay, just on a personal level, when I started getting into it, of course, you get these kind of periods of paranoia. You know you're dealing with a taboo subject, and then you get these flashes of, oh my God, am I just getting carried away with some ridiculous thing here? I'm not a Christian per se. I'm not a Buddhist. I don't really follow any particular religion, but try to be, spiritual. And I believe there's obviously some connection between all of us and everything. But that doesn't mean that we have to be the same. It just depends whether you tune into it or not. But I did ask in my own way. The higher consciousness, the higher intelligence, if you like, God, if you really want to say it that way. I'd said, look, am I going in the right direction? Just give me some signs. And then these things started happening, whether it was the sunspots, the grid. I just started, and these are never planned. I just go and film these things when the mood feels right. And something happens. There was also a time when I filmed the sun. The moon had a pink thing around it, kind of, and the sky was cloudy. The edges. So again, that was just one of those things. I don't know. You just have to observe it and think about it. But as far as synchronicity with other people, I think there is a core of people that are somehow connected through this, and it is spiritual. If someone, there's no point in arguing with the people that want to argue with you. You're not going to change their mind. They don't want to have their mind changed. But there is, I feel, sometimes you talk to someone and you just feel that you're on the same level, and that certain topics come up. We seem to be making progress. The whole thing with maps, and there seems to be a change of focus, not on the north now, rather than Antarctica. I don't know if you're feeling the same kind of thing there, but we're like, hang on a minute, okay, fine, there's a ring or not a ring, we don't really know, it's difficult to go and find out. But what is very apparent is that pre-Columbus, explorers were discovering the same thing in the north, and this, Mount Meru and the islands and the 4 channels going in, etc. It's been very precisely mapped out, and we don't see that now, and we see a much smaller area covering the North Pole. So that I feel as if progress has been made, because there are no flat earthers that are the really genuine. It's great to listen to some of the guys that have been doing it a long time, and they'll talk to each other, and they've got their different ideas, but they don't argue about it. They're not saying I'm right, you're wrong. They're just exploring, because there's this understanding that we know very, very little. All we know that it's not a spinning ball, so the rest is up to us. We've got to find out. So yeah, the synchronicity there. I think we are learning as we go. And even some of the people that are kind of backtracking now, that's fine, because it's part of the process. Nothing's permanent. We're moving forward all the time. So I do feel synchronicity, and it's sometimes, obviously, I get every 10 comments I get are kind of hate-filled comments, but then someone comes along and they're just oh wow, they're having the same experience, and so. yes, there is some synchronicity there, and it's very tangible.
I mean, to round out this topic, if you were to explain to somebody who's not on the same level, if somebody's just literally turned on, they're watching this and have no notion of flat Earth, how do you explain to them what I would call the simple notion of the celestial bodies moving above us? How do you explain that to somebody who believes we live on a globe?
I've been trying since finding out it was flat, and don't make any progress, do you? People that just don't want to know.
You've got to laugh because it's so simple. I mean, I could probably sum it up in about 10 words, but I want you to do it.
Just how it looks. Just it's how it looks.
You took the words out of my mouth. You want to know how it works? Look up and watch, and what it does is what it does. Yes, the moon moves. We're not spinning.
Yeah, that really is it. And of course, for my wife, she couldn't understand what was the big deal about flat Earth. Well, of course it's flat. What do so again, it just goes back.
That's an interesting point, actually, Nick, because the big deal is that the heliocentric model in itself versus the flat Earth, you go, well, on the one hand, why shouldn't there be a debate? What's the big deal? Why isn't it obvious? The problem is the massive layers of programming that people are subjected to through their square screen, through their iPad, through Facebook, through our language. And all of this is geared in the same direction. And that's why there's not a debate. That's why we're not allowed to discuss it. That's why it's ridiculed. And that's why people brace against it.
Yeah, it's everywhere. It is everywhere. And it really is. It is like, sometimes if you imagine some kind of cruddy movie where it's some dictatorship is ruling the world and their symbol is everywhere. That's how it is.
That's how it is, exactly.
It's everywhere. It's in your face. You turn on the TV, before the news, it's a spinning globe, a world news.
I really miss a YouTuber called Nathan Bell, and this guy does exposure of the subliminal world and shows you how in your face it really is. And he stopped making videos a few years back. It's heartbreaking, but check out Nathan Bell's channel. Anybody who's watching this, if you want to know just how in your face this programming really is, it's not just what you see is what you get, as I phrased it in one video log. There's a lot more to it. It is in plain sight, but if you haven't got eyes to see it, you won't.
Yeah.
I mean, how has FE affected your daily life, Nick?
Well, like most flat earthers, I was in a daze for several months and just I mean, I don't know how financially I've got through the past few months because I've hardly done any work. I consider making flat Earth videos work, and it's a job that I don't know. Maybe God works in mysterious ways. It's obviously something that I feel has to be done. I'm in a position where I can film the sun and things like that. So I'm a flat Earth addict, but that doesn't mean that I am necessarily out to prove that it's flat. It's just that's how it has turned out. It's just by looking, it's turned out that way. And I did wonder at first whether would I ever get to a stage where it's just okay, the Earth is flat, let's get on with life. But no, that hasn't happened. It's just because you feel the tide. You feel wakey put it nicely. You catch the wave, and we're still surfing that wave. And more and more people are getting on board. A lot of people are just letting it pass by. Is there going to be a mass awakening? Difficult to say.
I don't tell with that one. I mean, Wakey was also highlighting the fact that he'd got rid of his TV and therefore the programming wasn't so prevalent in his life. Has it been easier to switch on to the reality of our world being in Phuket or is there any programming at all in the media in Phuket for the globe, that is?
No, in fact, I didn't have a TV for like 10 years, so that obviously helped as well. And of course, at the same time, I was getting very in studying the culture, studying the language, studying Buddhism. So of course, I was on a completely different track and away from that. So what's interesting about the media here, even when there's been military coups, I mean, yeah, only in Thailand will you have a military coup that's peaceful. There's been some bloody ones, but no, the thing is, the media has a lot of things on it. You see, the king promotes this kind of self-reliance and self-sufficiency, grow your own stuff, make your own things. Of course, I've watched the Western kind of thing, lifestyle, come here and kind of be absorbed into the Thai culture, but at the same time, they very much have kept their roots. And at the end of the day, it's what it is community. And that's what Flat Earth is all about. It's getting back to being a community. And that's what's been lost in the West and what still remains here. You know, I can go down the road and getting breakfast is a wonderful experience because everyone's smiling and hi, and you have a conversation with your neighbors, and everyone, people are out. And you just, the community is thriving because here in Thailand, unemployment isn't a problem. There is no unemployment issue. Because if you can do something, you can go out and do it. You can make coffee, you can fix shoes, you can sharpen knives, whatever skill you have, you can go and make money doing that. Whereas going back to the UK recently, well, I know it's been like that for a long time. All you have is just these mega malls. All the kind of little shops and things have died. The communities have died. There is no community, and that is the biggest problem. I feel that. And really, essentially what I feel Flat Earth is bringing us back to is a community, and a much needed time.
I mean, you said your wife doesn't see the big deal in Flat Earth. Are there other Flat Earthers in Phuket, or is it just considered the norm that the Earth is flat there?
Well, I suppose the thing is, it's just not something to be concerned about. It's not. Again, the globe Earth, again, being a whole religious thing, because it ties into being the answer to the meaning of life. Is basically it was one cosmic accident, and you're here by mistake, and it's all blah blah blah. But are there other Flat Earthers in Phuket? I've met one or two others who, they're foreigners, they're expats, and they've got a Flat Earth buzz. But again, if I talk to the coffee guy, the Muslim coffee guy, well, yeah, it's flat. What's the big deal? I've asked people from, I could go and ask a monk, and well, it would be, he would just say, well, it doesn't matter what you think, we're all, you can have your own perspective, and that's fine. It wouldn't really there would be no importance placed on it being an answer to why we're here. So basically, I suppose you could say that, well, most Thais or Buddhists or Muslims they're flat earthers anyway. There's no debate.
So where we are has nothing to do with the why we're here.
Absolutely, we're here. Yes, that's a very good way of putting it. We're here to carry out our physical existence and move on to another plane, because it is about planes of existence.
Okay, well, do you believe in the devil?
Not as a person or an entity, but good and evil has to exist. So, to be honest, wouldn't it be a bit boring if everyone was just really good? So I think
sometimes it feels good to break a rule or two, but having everyone evil would be pretty bad too.
Mm-hmm. So no, I mean, the devil with horns and things like that. I mean, that's not. No, the ego is the devil inside.
Well, that maybe links back nicely into the next question, which is the kind of why the globe lie.
Why the globe lie? Is it necessarily a lie? It was maybe convenient to keep that premise at a certain point, and obviously still is for business, for commerce, for space commerce. You know, you could say that teachers and people like that are lying, but they don't know they are. They just assume, they just go along with it. And I think even the kind of things that David Icke raised maybe 10, 20 years ago, that, you know, people just don't think. People just repeat. It's in the textbook, and they, you know, it just, okay, and we deal with it. And again, I think, you know, the mathematician isn't going to, he will love his circle and his angles. They just, it's beauty for them. You look at the Brian Cox, you look at the kind of the grin on his face when he's talking about math, because it's all so beautiful. I get that. But the thing is, it doesn't matter to them that they have a circle, and that if the Earth is a circle and someone's standing upside down, or gonna, you know, they don't. That physical reality doesn't matter to them. They got to come up with some math to compensate for that. But rather than saying, "Hang on a minute," you know, so I can see that's where the problem lies.
If we're all perpetuating this lie, should we continue? Should we tell our children about flat Earth?
It's a tough one, isn't it? I've got kids, and so far I've tried to say, well, look, there's many different ways you can look at it, make up your own mind. And I remember my daughter asking me about the sun. Why does the sun seem to follow us? We're driving along in the car, and, you know, I instead of telling her, I asked her, what do you think the sun's doing? And she says, well, it's moving. It travels over us. So, okay, we'll leave it at that. My older daughter, she's just turning 20. It's not, you know, she kind of raises her eyebrows at Dad saving the world, you know, just doing his thing. So
one of the things she did recently was openly come out against Thomas Sheridan in his anti-flat Earth Yule special, and a couple of other velocities of now that he did. Why do you think people create crazy notions like psyops about flat Earth?
Do you mean you're saying that people have?
Well, to break it down very specifically, Thomas Sheridan said that the flat Earth movement has nothing to do with the fact and obvious nature of the Earth being flat, and everything to do with the CIA trying to discredit NASA, which is ridiculous. But why do you think people do that?
Why do I think people perpetuate the well, it's a belief thing, isn't it? It's a kind of ultimately the reason I responded to Thomas Sheridan was simply because it felt to me as if what it was his preconceived belief that was preventing him. You know, I was so surprised that someone would connect all the dots like he does, and I think I've seen that with a couple of other prominent people where, you know, and when flat Earth came along, it's like, oh well, of course all the other conspiracies go under the under the globe Earth kind of conspiracy umbrella. It all makes sense. But then to listen to someone who makes sense in all these other aspects of conspiracy theories, but then doesn't make that final connection because of a preconceived belief. So I felt that it came down to that. It wasn't, you know, there was there was a belief getting in the way of the logic.
Yeah, so frustrating, because even in his analysis of flat Earth as a psyop, I agreed with most of the notions when they were applied to the globe. You know, for instance, he said that you'd have to spend a huge amount of money to perpetuate this flat Earth lie. And I thought, they spend a huge amount of money perpetuating the globe lie.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what astounds people the most, isn't it? You know, and oh, well, everyone would have to be in on it, but it's easy. What's the word? Compartmentalization. It's people make screws or they make latches or something for the space station. They never see where it goes. And of course, when they make something for space, they make 2 or 3 of them. They make one that they're going to keep on the ground. They make one that they're going to test out, and this and that and the other. But so no one would be any the wiser. Even and you see these guys pumping the air. The SpaceX thing recently was a weird one as well. I mean, it's just these guys are so overjoyed and that they think they've pulled something off, and they truly believe they're sending things up into space.
Definitely. Yeah. It's not like they're barefaced lying at us. Nobody's that good at lying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the best way, isn't it? Just allow people to convince, if someone's already convinced that, why change their minds? Just let them go with it. And I think you made a good point earlier that that's the thing, isn't it? We've just gone with it, and all of us are as guilty as the people that started it off in the first place of just accepting it without questioning it. And of course, again, I suppose I'm sure most flat earthers are people that have been investigating conspiracy theories, and there's some that they agree with or don't, but they've at least been open to it and realized that there is a control grid, and the world is pretty much run by psychopaths, but and we allow it. And we're not going to change things by voting for people, for example. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But then you see people.
I think John LeBon's recently touched on false dichotomies, and he used the perfect example, which is the voting system, as a false dichotomy. Give people 2 rubbish choices and let them fight out amongst themselves which are the rubbish choices they're going to pick.
Yeah. It's not so obvious in the UK, but in the US, when you see the same families running, it's just like, hello. It's just, it's sickening. It's just, it really is, because, and that's quite frightening as well when although, when within the flat earth community, you can see a lot of changes taking place. You can see the whole thing taking on quite like a snowball effect. But then you go and look at people, kind of the amount of people still very much locked in to everything, and defending increasing taxes, defending retirement ages going up. I mean, they were putting the retirement age up in the UK, aren't they? Up to. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just.
I don't know. I don't pay attention to that.
Well, this is it. But people just put up with it. I think women now have to work until they're 65. So they've jumped up by 5 years. And for the men, it's going up incrementally year by year. And it's, but then in the same sentence, you might be arguing with someone and they'll say, yes, but England is so great. We're one of the most advanced countries in the world. Well, how come you're putting the retirement age up? It should be the other way around. And people, they're just, it's so, and it is the mainstream media, the TV. You wake up, you put the radio on in the car or the TV, and it's constantly there. And of course,
and the whole thing's run by psychopaths. I mean, I know Jaron's recently done a piece on the Hampstead kids, and one of the comments I picked up on while I was watching it was he questioned, how could someone possibly do this? It's a deep topic. It's talking about murdering babies. It's not for the faint of heart. But his question was, how could somebody do this? And it's understanding psychopaths that gives you the answer. They can do it because they don't give it a second thought. They have no empathy. They're not feeling anything for the human beings' lives that they're destroying. It doesn't even cross their mind. It doesn't come into their thought processes, and that's how they can do such brutal things. That's how you do end up with the media portrayal, the extreme end of the psychopath, which is the guy who's murdering lots and lots of people. But your average Joe psychopath just doesn't care. It's really easy peasy for them to dupe us and seduce us with fallacies like the globe. I mean, this is why I think Thomas Sheridan may very well have a realization. You know, he's obviously looking at, considering and discussing flat Earth. And that's always the start. You know, you and I both well know that a lot of people, not necessarily myself, start off by saying that they braced against flat Earth and said, no way, obviously it's a globe. So to see Thomas Sheridan doing that, it's not sidestepping it. You know, he gets loads of criticism. It's like, no. He's not doing what Alex Jones is doing. He's not just sidestepping it and muting it. He's talking about it, and that should be praised. That's brilliant news in my mind. You know, hopefully a few people who see his rants on flat Earth actually take the time to look at his views on psychopaths and see how, you know, superb he is. Maybe not.
No, but yeah, you're right. I mean, obviously, it does take different people at different paces. I just, you know, there's someone a close person I debate with, and it's there was finally the other day there was an admission that he couldn't find anything about to defend any defense against gyroscopes. I thought that was one when it was Mark Sargent or interviewed the guy, yeah. And I thought, wow, yeah, and that is a kicker, because you can't, you know, how planes wouldn't make it across the flat plane, or well, they wouldn't make it around the world, that's for sure, by relying on gyroscopes. But people,
when you explain to somebody about a plane having a false horizon and that being flat, that's what they're referencing the whole flight, you know, rather than, I mean, obviously that's based on gyroscopic motion, but, you know, that concept is something that you can really easily explain to somebody. Look, the plane is referencing a flat horizon non-stop. Yeah. Doesn't matter how far around your globe they fly. That's what they're using to reference where they come. And when they start off, they, you know, I'm sure they use electromagnetics or something to spin the gyro up on the ground, but they're referencing it at the start of the journey. And when they get to their destination, it's, you know, it's almost exactly what it was when they took off. You know, it's not perfect, it's not exactly, but it's very, very, very close. And if we were on a globe, that's physically impossible. You know, the gyro would reference your original point, and when you got round the curve of the Earth, it would be, you know, it would be referencing the horizon as being back where it was when you took off.
Yeah. It's really undeniable, isn't it? You know, it's funny. I wonder how many aeroplane pilots really might well be flat earthers but can't admit it. I don't know.
I don't think so. I mean, if you watch much stuff on plane crashes, they'll explain that, you know, there are points in the journey where they will have little to do, and it is very boring. I know I read a quote from one pilot that said it's, you know, hours of boredom punctuated by moments of sheer terror. But ultimately speaking, when they've got a flight, they've got a plan, they've got to book it, they've got a lot of checklists to go through. In essence, they're kept very occupied, and they don't get time. You know, then they haven't got a break to think about what shape the Earth is when they've got 24 different checklists to go through for the next, you know, stage of the journey. So I don't think they're given an opportunity. And a lot of the people that are coming forward on Mark Sargent's show, I know the most recent one, you know, was involved in aircraft, and ultimately, you know, he said the same thing. You don't get an opportunity to give this any consideration. It's only when you go back, like you said right at the beginning of this show, that you have a realization, as opposed to some massive penny drop moment.
Definitely, yeah. That's it, isn't it? It's having it pointed out. And once it's pointed out, yeah,
you've seen it all along. We all have, because it's reality.
Yeah. And even those defenders of the globe, they know it. They sense it. Feel it. It's they immediately put up the defenses because they can straight away. And that's why, you know, you can have a conversation with someone who's not a flat earther, and they can be open. And well, you know, I still believe it's a globe, but cool. And it's fine. But then you get the others that will just fight tooth and nail, argue, and it gets to the point where you can even ask them to talk about or admit to or just something that we do see that is completely, then they will won't go there because they know it's a slippery slope.
Everything within the heliocentric model is based on an assumption, and in some of Math Powerland's recent videos, he's been doing a superb job of just boiling it down to one statement, which is there is no curve.
Okay, yeah. We've never seen it. It's always been assumed. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. It is funny now to think of it spinning around at 1,000 miles an hour and all that.
Oh, I totally agree. That's why I've always got such a big smile. It does crack me up. It's just ludicrous. What about the laugh?
You have. Yeah,
Nick, you've been an absolutely superb guest. Was there anything you wanted to add before we wrap it up?
No, we've covered a lot of topics. It's been great, you know. It's you know, we've got to be flat Earth monks. We've got to be peaceful. The whole point is to be peaceful. All the core flat earthers, the genuine flat earthers, what they found is peace and an understanding that we've got to get back together as a community. And you can just take that as a guide, and we've got to, maybe just let's start taking action. Let's start. We don't necessarily have to prove that the Earth is a globe, but it's all about reconnecting with nature, isn't it? And reconnecting with each other. And it's desperately needed.
With ourselves, using what God gave us, using our own eyes, using our own senses, not trusting what the TV tells us.
So, yeah, turn off the bloody TV. That's my final word. Turn off the TV.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good point. I mean, I lost interest in TV when I got rid of it after college because I couldn't afford it. Never really went back to it. And I think that, like Wakey Wakey said, has a huge part to play. That if you're constantly being subjected to globe programming, you will accept the globe.
Yeah. That's right. And it's all about keeping up with the Joneses and not standing out, isn't it? And you see that conformity more and more. In times gone by, uniqueness was celebrated, but not anymore. Everyone wants to be the same.
Definitely. Nick from Phuket Word, thank you very much for being on Flat Earth UK Live.
Thank you very much for having me, Nathan. It's been a wonderful chat.
It's been a pleasure having you. So all of you who've been chatting away nicely in the live chat, thank you very much for tuning into Flat Earth UK Live. I've been Nathan Oakley.